In the volatile landscape of the Middle East, a protracted shadow war between Iran and the United States has reached a critical flashpoint. This gray zone conflict, escalating since 2018, has moved beyond proxy battles and attacks on commercial shipping. It has now culminated in a direct, precise, and calculated military strike on Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, a central hub for all U.S. air operations in the region. This event is not merely an isolated incident. It represents a fundamental and dangerous shift in the rules of engagement, one that challenges the very foundation of American military deterrence. As a strategic analyst, my purpose here is not to offer opinion, but to provide a clear, technical deconstruction of this event. We will examine the established facts, the mechanics of the institutions involved, and the logical consequences that follow. Our objective is to understand how a facility designed as a strategic anchor against Iranian threats became the target of a successful attack. This analysis will trace the chain of events from the political framework to the operational realities on the ground, connecting each piece to form a coherent picture of a new and precarious strategic reality in the region. The central thesis of our analysis is that the strike on Prince Sultan Air Base marks the definitive transition from a low-intensity proxy-based conflict to a direct state-on-state military confrontation. This event demonstrates that Iran now possesses not only the advanced technological capability for precision, long-range strikes, but also the political will to deliberately target high-value American military assets. The attack was a calculated climax to an escalatory process, designed to shatter the existing legal norms of engagement, exploit vulnerabilities in Western defense systems, and generate tangible consequences for U.S. military strategy. The core of the problem lies in the strategic purpose of the base itself. Prince Sultan Air Base was specifically reactivated and expanded by the U.S. in 2019 to serve as a supposed fortress in the sand. Its location was deliberately chosen to place critical military assets outside the presumed range of Iran's shorter-range missiles, making it a symbol of American deterrence doctrine. The successful penetration of its defenses and the destruction of strategic aircraft on its tarmac represents a catastrophic failure of that doctrine, proving that assets once considered safe are now demonstrably vulnerable. To fully grasp the significance of this moment, we will proceed methodically. First, we will explore the legal and political framework, examining how this attack constitutes an unambiguous act of war under international law and the constitutional tensions it ignites within the United States. Next, we will dissect the institutional machinery, from the Iranian command structure that ordered the strike to the American and Saudi air defense systems that failed to stop it. Finally, we will analyze the severe, practical implications of the assets lost, which fundamentally degrade the U.S. ability to project air power across the entire region. This deep dive into the structural, institutional, and strategic layers of the conflict is essential for a complete understanding of its gravity. To support this kind of detailed, fact-based analysis, a community of engaged viewers is crucial. If you find this approach to understanding complex geopolitical events valuable, consider subscribing to the channel, liking this video, and contributing to the discussion in the comments below. Your engagement allows us to continue providing in-depth, sober assessments of critical global developments. Now, let us begin our examination of the immediate aftermath and its legal ramifications. The strike on Prince Sultan Air Base is not a simple escalation. It is an event with a precise definition under the established rules of global conflict. In the language of international law, Iran's direct military attack on a base hosting U.S. forces within the sovereign territory of Saudi Arabia constitutes an unambiguous casus belli, a formal act of war. This term is not merely rhetorical. It signifies a specific legal threshold has been crossed. The action moves beyond proxy warfare or covert operations into a clear state-on-state armed attack, fundamentally altering the legal and political landscape for all parties involved. This legal classification directly triggers one of the most fundamental principles of the international system: the right to self-defense. This right is formally codified in Article 51 of the United Nations Charter. It explicitly states that nothing in the Charter shall impair the inherent right of individual or collective self-defense if an armed attack occurs against a member of the United Nations. By launching this strike, Iran has legally activated this provision, granting the United States and Saudi Arabia a clear, internationally recognized justification to respond with military force to protect their sovereignty and security interests from further aggression. The location of the attack on Saudi territory adds another layer of legal complexity, invoking the principle of collective self-defense. Because the strike targeted U.S. assets stationed in a host nation, the act is simultaneously an attack on both countries. This shared threat provides the legal foundation for a joint military response. The framework for such a response is often predetermined by existing bilateral agreements. The mutual defense pacts between the United States and Saudi Arabia, designed for exactly this type of contingency, would now become the central legal instruments guiding any coordinated military action against the aggressor state. These mutual defense agreements are formal treaties that outline the responsibilities and commitments each nation has to the other in the event of an external attack. While the specific clauses remain classified, they generally establish protocols for intelligence sharing, joint operational planning, and the coordinated use of military force. The attack on Prince Sultan Air Base forces both Washington and Riyadh to examine these binding commitments, transforming a theoretical alliance into a practical, urgent necessity. The activation of these pacts would signal a unified front, escalating the confrontation from a bilateral U.S.-Iran issue to a broader regional conflict. While international law provides a clear justification for a military response, the execution of such a response is governed by a complex and often contentious domestic political framework within the United States. The U.S. Constitution creates a deliberate tension between the executive and legislative branches regarding the power to wage war. The President acts as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, granting them the authority to direct military operations. However, Article 1, Section 8, explicitly grants Congress the sole power to declare war, creating a system of checks and balances designed to prevent unilateral decisions on large-scale conflict. This constitutional friction is at the heart of the modern debate over the authorization for use of military force, or AUMF. An AUMF is a specific piece of legislation passed by Congress to grant the President the legal authority to use the military for a defined purpose, short of a formal declaration of war. It has become the primary legal tool for U.S. military engagements since World War II. In the wake of the strike on the air base, any discussion of retaliation immediately centers on whether the President has the pre-existing legal authority to act, or must seek new approval from Congress. The central legal question becomes whether existing authorizations could be stretched to cover a direct war with the state of Iran. Specifically, the debate would focus on the AUMFs passed in 2001 and 2002. The 2001 AUMF was enacted after the September 11th attacks to target al-Qaeda and associated forces. The 2002 AUMF was passed to authorize the invasion of Iraq. Neither of these laws was written with the intention of authorizing a state-on-state war with Iran, a nation that was an adversary to both al-Qaeda and Saddam Hussein's regime. Therefore, any attempt to use these decades-old authorizations as legal justification for a retaliatory strike against Iran would be met with fierce political and legal opposition. Proponents might argue for a broad interpretation, linking Iran to groups covered by the original texts. Opponents would counter that such a move represents an unconstitutional overreach of executive power, bypassing Congress's explicit role in deciding matters of war and peace. This internal debate could significantly delay or complicate the speed and scale of any American military response, creating a critical window of strategic uncertainty immediately following the attack. This clash between a clear international legal right to retaliate and a deeply conflicted domestic process for authorizing it defines the immediate political reality. The attack by Iran did more than just destroy military assets. It ignited a constitutional crisis within the United States. It forces a direct confrontation between the president's perceived need for swift, decisive action and Congress's constitutional mandate to deliberate on the commitment of the nation to a new, large-scale war. The resolution of this internal conflict is as consequential as the military event itself, shaping the strategic options available in the critical hours and days that follow. To understand how this attack was possible, we must first examine the institutional machinery that orchestrated it. On the Iranian side, the operation was not executed by the country's conventional military, but by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC. Specifically, the responsibility lies with its aerospace force, which operates Iran's ballistic missile and drone programs. This entity functions with significant autonomy, answering not to the standard military chain of command, but directly to Iran's supreme leader. This direct line of authority allows for decisions of profound strategic consequence to be made and executed with speed and ideological alignment, bypassing traditional bureaucratic hurdles. The IRGC's unique position within Iran's power structure is critical to understanding the nature of this strike. It was conceived as the primary defender of the Islamic Revolution, operating parallel to the regular armed forces. This dual military system allows the regime to maintain a force driven by ideological commitment, rather than purely national defense. The IRGC's control over advanced missile technology, combined with its direct accountability to the highest political authority, transforms it into a potent instrument of state policy. It is an institution designed for asymmetric warfare and high-risk operations that a conventional military might be hesitant to undertake. On the American side, the institutional framework responsible for responding to such a threat is U.S. Central Command, or CENTCOM. As one of the 11 unified combatant commands of the Department of Defense, CENTCOM has a singular area of responsibility: the Middle East, Central Asia, and parts of South Asia. It is the senior military headquarters that designs, oversees, and executes all U.S. military operations in the region. Prince Sultan Air Base, and every American asset on it, falls directly under CENTCOM's operational control. Its mandate is to ensure stability, deter aggression, and protect U.S. interests within this volatile theater. In a crisis, the chain of command is designed for rapid information flow, from the tactical edge to the highest levels of strategic decision-making. The process begins with the radar operators and sensor technicians at Prince Sultan Air Base, detecting the incoming threat. This data is instantaneously relayed up the command ladder, from the base commander to the Air Component Command for the region, and then to CENTCOM headquarters. From there, the information travels to the Pentagon and the National Security Council in the White House, where the president is briefed. This entire sequence is a race against time, where every second dictates the effectiveness of the response. The defense of the base itself was not solely an American responsibility. It relied upon a complex, integrated air defense system jointly operated by U.S. and Saudi forces. This network is designed to create layered protection, with different systems targeting threats at various altitudes and ranges. The cornerstone of this defense is the Patriot missile system, a platform used by both nations to counter ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and aircraft. The institutional premise of this shared architecture is that a combined, coordinated defense is more resilient and effective than one operated by a single nation, pooling resources and intelligence for mutual protection. However, the attack on Prince Sultan Air Base exposed a catastrophic failure within this integrated institutional and technological framework. Despite the activation of U.S. and Saudi Patriot missile batteries, the defensive shield was penetrated. A portion of the incoming wave of missiles or drones successfully evaded interception and struck their targets with precision. This event represents more than a technical shortcoming. It is a profound institutional collapse. The very system designed and implemented to prevent exactly this scenario proved incapable of fulfilling its primary function, raising fundamental questions about the reliability of the entire defensive posture in the region. The incident starkly illustrates an institutional asymmetry. Iran's IRGC, with its centralized autonomous command structure, was able to plan and execute a complex, long-range precision strike. In contrast, the reactive, multi-layered, and multinational defensive structure overseen by CENTCOM demonstrated a critical vulnerability. The Iranian system was built for proactive, decisive action, while the U.S.-Saudi system, though technologically advanced, failed its defensive test. The success of the attack was therefore not just a victory of missiles over interceptors, but of one institutional philosophy and operational doctrine over another, in a direct, high-stakes confrontation. This failure has severe repercussions for the credibility of the institutions involved. For CENTCOM, it signals a breakdown in its core mission to protect U.S. forces and assets. For the U.S.-Saudi military partnership, it exposes a gap in the collective defense agreement, undermining the trust placed in its effectiveness. The perception of American technological superiority, a key pillar of its deterrence strategy, is directly challenged. The event forces a painful reevaluation of not just the hardware, but the operational procedures, intelligence assessments, and institutional arrangements that were supposed to guarantee the security of such a critical military installation. Ultimately, the breakdown of this institutional machinery is what creates the tangible consequences of the attack. The failure of the air defense network is not an abstract concept. It is the direct cause of the destruction of vital military hardware on the ground. The IRGC's ability to bypass this shield and CENTCOM's inability to prevent it are two sides of the same coin. This institutional dynamic, the successful offensive action and the failed defensive reaction, directly sets the stage for the crippling real-world implications that follow, fundamentally altering the strategic balance of power by degrading the United States' ability to project force. The consequences of the institutional and legal breakdowns are not abstract. They are measured in destroyed hardware and degraded military capability. The confirmed loss of 5 U.S. Air Force aerial refueling tankers, either KC-135 Stratotankers or the more modern KC-46 Pegasus, represents a direct and crippling blow to American strategic power. While the financial cost of these aircraft runs into the hundreds of millions of dollars, their true value is not monetary. Their destruction translates into a tangible reduction of the United States' ability to project air power across the entire Middle East, a reality with immediate and severe operational implications. These tankers are what military strategists call force multipliers. They function as flying gas stations, essential for refueling fighter jets, bombers, and surveillance aircraft while they are in mid-flight. This capability is the backbone of modern air campaigns, allowing combat and support aircraft to operate far from their home bases for extended periods. Without aerial refueling, the reach, endurance, and operational tempo of any air force are severely limited. The 5 tankers destroyed on the tarmac at Prince Sultan Air Base were not just planes. They were the logistical enablers for nearly every U.S. air mission in the region. The immediate effect of this loss is a drastic reduction in the effective combat radius of all American air power stationed in the theater. Fighter jets that once could patrol for hours over strategic choke points must now return to base sooner. Long-range bombers tasked with holding distant targets at risk may no longer have the refueling support necessary to complete their missions safely. Surveillance drones that provide critical intelligence depend on tankers to remain airborne for long durations. By eliminating these 5 key assets, the Iranian strike effectively shortened the leash on the entirety of U.S. Central Command's air forces. This operational constraint creates an immediate logistical paralysis. In the critical hours and days following the attack, any potential retaliatory airstrikes become far more complex, risky, and significantly slower to plan and execute. Military planners must now account for a severe shortage of refueling assets, forcing them to either scale back the scope of any response or divert tankers from other global commands, a process that takes precious time. The attack was surgically designed not only to inflict damage, but to directly impede the very capacity of the United States to strike back in a swift and decisive manner. In the medium term, the strike's most profound implication is the shattering of a core tenet of U.S. military posture. Bases like Prince Sultan, intentionally positioned deep within Allied territory, were believed to be safe rear area sanctuaries, immune from direct attack. This assumption is now proven false. The successful strike demonstrates that even well-defended strategic hubs are vulnerable to Iran's growing long-range precision strike capabilities. This reality forces a complete and painful reassessment of how and where the U.S. deploys its forces, as assets once considered secure are now on the front line of a new and dangerous battlefield. The attack on Prince Sultan Air Base, therefore, marks the definitive transition from a low-intensity proxy-based shadow war to a direct, strategic military confrontation. It was the calculated climax of an escalatory process, an event designed to systematically break the established rules of engagement. By directly targeting a U.S. military installation, Iran crossed a legal and political threshold, moving the conflict out of the gray zone and into the unambiguous realm of state-on-state warfare. This act shattered the unwritten norms that had, until this point, placed some limits on the scope of the conflict between the two nations. This strategic shift was enabled by the successful exploitation of vulnerabilities in the institutional and technological architecture of Western defense. The failure of the integrated U.S. and Saudi air defense network was not merely a technical glitch. It was a demonstration that Iran's offensive capabilities could overcome a multi-layered system designed specifically to counter them. The strike proved that one nation's autonomous, ideologically driven command structure could successfully plan and execute an attack that a complex multinational defensive alliance was unable to prevent, challenging the very premise of American technological and institutional superiority in the region. The practical consequences of this failure are severe and lasting. The destruction of critical refueling aircraft has tangibly hamstrung U.S. military strategy, creating immediate logistical and operational constraints. More fundamentally, the event has redefined the balance of power in the Middle East. The perception of American bases as untouchable sanctuaries has been destroyed, and with it, a key pillar of U.S. conventional deterrence has been effectively challenged. The security architecture of the entire region, long underwritten by the assumption of American military dominance, has been fundamentally altered by this single, precise, and calculated strike. Ultimately, the attack leaves all parties in a more precarious and dangerous position. The rules of the game that once governed the conflict, however tenuously, have been irrevocably changed. With the crossing of this red line, the threshold for a full-scale regional war has been dangerously lowered. The strike on Prince Sultan Air Base was not just an attack on aircraft parked on a runway. It was a carefully executed move that has reshaped the strategic landscape, leaving the United States, its allies, and Iran itself facing a future with fewer off-ramps and a much higher risk of catastrophic miscalculation.